let us take a moment to discuss Near-Mage, an adventure game released this year by a studio called Stuck in Attic, which you may previously know from their hit game Give Us a Cthulhu Adventure. This is a sort of continuation of that game. It features some overlapping characters, but for the most part it is its own thing. Not only in the sense of story, but also in the sense of what kind of adventure game this is. You see, it's not a standard point-and-click affair. Okay, yes, you point and click, that's most of the game, unless you're using a controller, but this isn't a traditional adventure game. There's no inventory here because you're a mage. Well, you're a Near-Mage. Magic is your inventory. You don't just pick up random stuff and shove into your pants. Okay, yes, you do that, but it's implied that you did it with a purpose because somebody asked you to, not because you found a ladder lying around and somehow stuck it in your pocket. Then again, we are talking about magic, and the main character has a, let's call it a storage room that exists outside of space and time, so yeah, there's in-world explanations for where a ladder could have gone, certainly more than in Still Life 2, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is an adventure game that doesn't have, well, puzzles per se. It has dilemmas more than puzzles, because when you say puzzle, you think to yourself, solving this will be quite the conundrum. It won't. The vast majority of puzzles in Near-Mage are quite easy, quite simple. But how you solve them is the game, because this has managed to do what many other adventure games have dreaded to do in the past, and that is give you multiple ways of solving a puzzle. Imagine if you had multiple ways of solving the puzzle with the duck in The Longest Journey. You'd have probably not been an insane person now, would you? In that way, I'd call this more akin to Quest for Glory, only instead of having 3 classes, you have the one class, the Near-Mage. But, well, depending on how you learn to become a Near-Mage, you're a different type of Near-Mage. It's not spelled out, but you can only learn magic by combining 3 different elements, and there's a bunch of elements in the game, and depending on which elements you learn first, you'll have different spells. And those different spells presume different methods of solving dilemmas. Some could be a bit more subtle. For example, hey, you can distract somebody's attention by making snow, or petals float in the air, or you could just kill them. There's a lot of wanton murder possible in the game. I do not mince words when I say that in this game you can rack up a really high body count for an adventure game. It's probably the most NPCs I've killed in an adventure game since Monkey Island 3. And I'm not talking about the skeletons you could kill at first, no. Guybrush absolutely 100% murders a guy in cold blood with no remorse and no consequences. Here, there are consequences, often just short-term consequences, and in a few cases also in the long run. You're not really told about that long run up until the end of the game, but I don't think it actually matters that much. So here's the thing about Near-Mage. It's beautiful. It looks absolutely stunning. Every screen of this game has a lot of love and care put into it. I mean, it took them 5 years to make it. It's no wonder that it looks like this. Every scene is filled with NPCs, it's filled with characters, it's filled with as much visual and auditive content as they could put in there. It's magnificent. You will want to go to Sighișoara and check the place out based entirely on this game. Now, you may be a bit disappointed that the real Sighișoara does not have an actual magic school next to it. That's in an invisible realm, but that's just because you're not a vampire like us and can't see it. Or you're not magic attuned like the main character, Ilinca Vraja. Much like the aforementioned April Ryan of The Longest Journey, or Zoe for that matter, she's at a crossroads in her life, trying to decide what to do next. When out of the blue, a cookie great aunt sends her a letter saying, "Hey, Transylvania's fun! There's no vampires here, in spite of the evidence. Come visit, stay a while. You'll like it." And that's what Ilinca does. She goes to Sighișoara and discovers that, well, her family is kind of really into magic, like really into it. And thus, it is now her turn to learn the dark maybe not completely. Depends on how you play arts at the University of Rakus, where your teachers are werewolves, vampires, well, technically strigoi, elementals, and all sorts of other creatures. But there is something afoot here. Somebody has been stealing precious artifacts and using students to do it. Students who don't remember anything about their acts. There's talk about a vampirically fascist-inclined movement on the rise. And somewhere in the darkness, the Necronomicon stirs. As a setting, as a jumping off point for a story, it's fantastic. It is just one of the best settings I've seen in an adventure game. And a lot of that has to do again with the visual style, with how much they put into this game. And it disappoints me to say that the game doesn't really 100% live up to that promise that the visuals allude to. And that is mostly, I would say, because of the way that the game mechanically works. You've got 20 spells and about 30-ish quests in the game. Let's say about half of those quests are dependent on magic or diplomacy, if you will.
You made me do this.
Calculate that in your head, or pull up a calculator. Let's say 15-ish quests with over a dozen methods of being resolved. That is a lot of content that you have to make, which the player will probably not see unless they replay the game a bunch of times as different types of mages. And even then, the quests don't chain into each other that much in terms of how you resolve them, but still, that work was put in there. And that work takes a lot of time, and it requires sacrificing other parts of the game. I know this because a while ago, 10 years ago, I was working on a adventure-ish, RPG-ish game, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm gonna make a multiple choice quest here that involves a rat stealing a carpentry implement for reasons that I forgot. And there were 3 ways to solve that quest, if I remember properly. But anyway, it took about 5 minutes to actually finish the quest, regardless of what method you used. Actually, all of them combined took 5 minutes to complete. Making it and playtesting it took several hours. And since Near-Mage was made by 3 people, that is where, well, that on graphics, is where the bulk of the development time went into. And it's neat, like, don't get me wrong, it is super neat that you can just turn a section of a town into a bloodbath and have it stay like that forever. Just because you thought it'd give somebody some traumatic flashbacks and make them change their ways. I mean, you also had a memory recall spell, and you could have probably solved the quest differently by giving that character an item that they sought. Or you could have killed them, though I don't think that would have helped much. Not that it matters, because a lot of the quests are optional. They're secondary to the plot, so the way you solve them, that's up to you, brother. But because of this mechanic, I think the rest of the game isn't as fleshed out as it could be. There are sections that you have no reason to visit because the content was supposed to be there was cut for time, because, well, you can't really make a game for 5 years with a really low budget, even if you're just 3 people. Not at this level of quality. Had it maybe a higher budget, maybe 2 or 3 more people working on it. I'm not a huge team, but still more hands on deck. I think this could have turned into something that was more akin to Quest for Glory, or if you will, I don't know if any of you played Academagia. It was a sort of single-player Harry Potter-ish School of Wizardry game in the style of Fallen London, you know, the web-based game. Echo Bazaar, if you remember it by that name. Near-Mage has some of the same vibes as Academagia, but whereas that was text-based, this one has the visuals. It does, however, lack the, maybe I could call it RPG-ness, if you will, with progression and the way that you interact with characters. I mean, although the quests, you have probably the most liberty you'll have in any kind of this game to solve things. It makes Telltale games of, oh, you chose to do this instead of this look like nothing. There's a linearity in its progression that is forced upon you at some points. You can kind of feel that they were trying to get things finished after a certain point because there's a bunch of creatures in the game called Mitskins. They're like flying cat bat things, and they'll give you messages, and towards the end of the game, that is how progression happens. You will be constantly assaulted by Mitskins giving you messages because there's no SMS service in Rakus. At some point, I just thought that because of all the spam that I was getting through the Mitskins, one of them would try to sell me WoW Gold or ISK or boner pills. I think that would have worked as a joke. I actually think that more things could have worked as jokes in the game because, well, it's not a comedy. This isn't a Monkey Island take on a wizarding school. It's not a parody. It's not trying to poke fun at tropes about this kind of style of story. It's very earnest in what it is. It's a story about somebody growing up to discover the world is different than what they knew and finding their place in that world. It's not devoid of comedy. Again, the spells lend themselves to a lot of situations that are comedic or bloody, but this is not Gibbous, a game that was filled with stereotypes that it was poking fun of, with situations that were specifically made for comedy. And I think people that will play it expecting that kind of game will be disappointed. I myself, I'd say that you should maybe try the game. I think it's worth it. It's under $20, which is the proper price for adventure games. But this could have been so much more if there were resources available for it. I wish there was more to do in Sighișoara itself. I wish there was more to do in only plenty of locations that you explore. Maybe more use to the characters. Maybe more dialogue with them. Maybe more to do with that bar filled with invisible vampires. Well, they're not invisible permanently. You have to say fangs out for Harambe or something like that for them to show up. What you'll get is a game about experimenting. But I think that ties into the main plot. I mean, it's about coming of age, of figuring out stuff. And experimenting is a part of that. Some experiments involve making it snow in July. Others, summoning a bunch of wolves. Setting people on fire. Again, there's 20 spells. There's a lot of choice in there. And that in itself may be enough. Well, that and the very, very beautiful artwork and Romanian folklore. Oh, sure, the Cthulhu stuff shows up as well, but it's very centered on the local flavor of folklore, which is basically non-existent outside of a few local studios who make games from time to time, and maybe The Secret World by Funcom, which we're somehow getting back to the longest journey again. Oh, also, didn't mention this because it really does have no effect in the game. You can dress the character up in a variety of different outfits. That in itself probably took a lot of work as well. There was effort put into this. A lot of effort. And it shows. I just wish there could have been a different style of game built on top of it. And the bit that kind of really bugs me is that all the systems to build that game are already there. The way you use spells is being tracked. There's NPCs everywhere. You're free to roam and explore the entire area, basically, like from the first hour. It's on the cusp of being something greater. But that would require more resources, more people, and, well, it's not the kind of game that the studio wants to make. The kind of scope, I mean. The kind of size. And I can understand that. It's, especially in this economy. Romania's, by the way, on the verge of collapsing, in case you're wondering. It's probably not the best time to begin gigantic projects, is what I mean. If you take the game just for what it is, then it is absolutely fine. There's a lot of detail in it. I mean, some stuff could have been a bit more fleshed out. Yes, again, it's what I've been talking about this entire video. But there's small stuff like at some point you're being followed, and you're not just told you're being followed, you actually see people, or at least things, following you in the corner of the eye, if you will. It's a really fun little detail that you start looking out for once you realize it's happening. It makes you a bit paranoid, which is a good thing from a game with this kind of plotline. Who knows who's really the bad guy? Well, you kind of get to know like 15 minutes in after you meet him, because the game's not too subtle about it. But the plot is still enjoyable, especially if you've played Gibbous. So go check out the game. I'm happy they made it. I'm always happy when a local dev gets to release something, and if it has success, that's even better. It means they can make more stuff. Or at least it means they're not ruined financially for the rest of their lives, which is usually what happens. Which reminds me, I should probably get onto doing that Zoria Age of Shattering video, which is about a year late already. I should probably really go back to developing Quack Job. I was supposed to have a demo out like 2 years ago. The ducks no longer fall through the floor though, so I'm making progress. Goodbye everybody. Take care.
That is the Zmoo.